Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Literacy Journeys with Linda. And I have as my guest today a wonderful young lady named Adeeba Rana. Now let me say
Rana.
Rana. Rana. And she is an avid reader.
So I am Adeeba Rana. I am a poet and a librarian, and I work for the Brooklyn Public Library. Absolutely, in Brooklyn, New York, it is the third largest library system in the country.
Woo!
And I am a young adult librarian, and I love my job.
Young adult librarian. Now, what does that mean? You're a young adult and you're a librarian. No, that no.
I'm a teen librarian, that my job is to connect with our teens,
Huh.
and inspire them towards, for me, that really means like better overall citizenship and just inspire them towards creating a life that they want to live for themselves.
Well, that is from what I read and from what I understand, that's a challenging market, that age group, the juveniles, because sometimes they're not interested in reading that much. I think they don't do a lot of leisure reading. When they're done with school, I'll do my homework, but to pick up a book, no, I'll do a video game or something like that. But that's just the image. But what do you?
Absolutely. I think that there are a lot of teens who say they don't like reading, and partly that is because they haven't found the right book. So for me, a lot of that will be like, okay, but I want to see where you are reading in your life. So that means if you're reading like cheats for a game, that you're reading. If
Yeah,
you're reading an article about your favorite like anime, you're reading. If you love manga, like that's reading.
there
Comic books
is.
and graphic novels and like all of those things are still reading. And so at first I like to like bring up the things that they might be doing in their life that they don't um understand to still be reading, and
Mhm.
then I like to encourage people to read what they like. So
Exactly.
I myself am a big genre reader. Like I love romance, I love mysteries, I
Mm.
love paranormal romance, and so um, I always encourage people that like reading anything good is reading. So
And what type of devices do you use? Do you like a hardcover to get that tactile sensation, or do you do the e-readers, or do you do it all?
I do both. I do all of the things. I also love audiobooks. Like audiobooks are still reading, that they light up the same centers of the brain that
Yeah.
reading does. And so I always advocate for things like podcasts and audiobooks, because sometimes also it's really nice to have somebody tell us a story. Like
Oh, yeah.
I think you and I were lucky enough to have parents who read to us or teachers who read to us when we were younger, and it's really lovely to have somebody reading a story in your ear. It reminds us of like who we
Yeah.
were.
So,
Really,
so I'm glad you mentioned that. Take me back to that time, Adiba. Your journey. What was your home environment like? How did you become such an avid reader?
I grew up in a household where story was always really important. So we like told stories around the dinner table. We always had little stories. Both of my parents identify as poets as well. And so there was always poetry in my life, whether it was through songs or whether it was through very small, like little couplets that my parents would just say, like they were household sayings.
Can you remember any of them?
Like one of them that I remember is that my mom would just always be like, um, you know, even if we're standing still, we can still bloom like a rose. And I didn't understand that that was totally a couplet, like that is a direct translation from Urdu, which I grew up speaking both English and Urdu at home. And but like, things like that were just part of our normal vernacular at home. And then when I started school, I loved story time and I loved the library. Like I love the way it's organized. And by the time I was in fourth grade, my teacher used to let me. I was reading the American Girl doll books.
Mm-hmm.
Like I started those probably in second and third grade, and by the time I was in fourth grade, I was reading through them really fast, and so I needed other things to read. So my teacher would let me go down to the library once a week on our library trip. Like on 2 of our other free periods, she would let me go, or during my lunchtime, so that I could find other books to read. Because at that point, I definitely was reading a book a day. And so
Even
it's
at that
just,
young age.
yeah, books just became my constant companion. And in a lot of ways, I really feel like saved my life.
Okay, now you really got to tell me about that. Because when you
I
say
just,
save your life, because that means you could have gone in one direction, you could have gone in another direction, but somehow books, that's where you landed. What
yeah,
happened?
I think so for me, characters with resilience were a big theme. They were a big theme. So even if we go back to like the simple things like the American Girl doll books,
Yes.
like all of those are young women who are faced with challenges in their lives and they find a way to overcome. And so for me, that was like a really great example. And I think that in a lot, like my library was not at that point, right, there were not as many books for children of color. So what I looked for were like strong characters who were able to get through things in life, and I found a lot of those. And those examples taught me compassion, and they taught me about other people's lives. And when I started reading romance novels, they taught me about history.
Mm-hmm.
Like and I have all these random small little tidbits in my brain from all the things that I have read. And those characters saved me from having a childhood that was more lonely. Like
Yes.
I always had friends, but also I was one of the only brown kids in my class. Like I was the only Muslim girl, I was the only brown girl. And there can be a real loneliness in just being different from your classmates, just being different from the people
Absolutely.
you can see. And so reading other people's stories reminded me that like there are many ways for us to exist and be, and for us to love each other in the world, really. And that's what I feel like saved my life. Like I think I learned compassion and respect from definitely my family, but also from reading about what it looks like to live a life with those things.
Wow. Did you find that any of your other classmates were avid readers like you?
Actually, so my best friends in high school were also readers like me. And so when we were in middle school together, I would always have a book with me. I would read during lunch, or I would go to the library and meet people like who were also in the library. And so that is really how I found my friends. And one
Yeah.
of my best friends, actually, her mom used to volunteer at the library and spent a lot of time apparently talking about me to her daughter. And when we finally met, it was like great because we had books to compare and we had so many stories to
A
tell one
kindred
another.
spirit for reading books.
Yes.
Oh, that's great. Now, you've got to tell me about your reading habit. That's just amazing. How in the world, Adeeba, do you read a book? Did you say a book a day?
I try to get through a book a day. It's probably averages out to like 5 books a week, depending on how long things are. And Miss Linda, I am a slow reader. I'm not a fast reader, but I just read a lot. Like I will read while waiting for things,
And
like
you're including audiobooks. You're including,
audiobooks. Audiobooks, actually, usually I read much slower because those I usually read when I'm driving in the car
Mhm.
or like in the shower doing a task. And
So
so,
you're talking about actual books. You're reading that many,
yes,
and these are teen books, or just and these are book. These are
these
not.
are just books. I read around. I get around the genres. I like them all, so I
Wow,
like to pepper a little bit of everything into it.
that's amazing. But you know what? That you're making some choices there, though, because you could choose. You're choosing to read that much, and I love it. But let's say someone else had a different life, like somebody with little kids, or you know,
Absolutely.
they just wouldn't be able to have that much time. But what a gift you have to me to be
Yes.
able, in this season of your life, to be able to
Yeah.
do that.
It makes me really grateful. It makes me really grateful. And I like, so when I'm with my niece and my nephew, I like that they see me reading because then they also will read. And I think those habits are brought into our life in that way. But I will sometimes read while I'm eating breakfast or read while I'm eating my lunch or
Okay,
if
so
I'm
that's
taking
how
a
you fit it
15
in. You
minute
incorporate
break.
it into just your what you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. That's what I try to
Do you have any other interests? Like, do you watch movies or television or?
I do. I do. I have a lot of interests. That's the fun part about being a librarian is that you learn about a lot of things. And so then you have a lot of interests in the world. So I love to watch movies and I love to watch television. And I spend time doing that usually like later in the evening after my day has really wound down. That's when I will do those things. But I definitely will be reading before and after that. Like before I go to bed, I'm usually reading.
Yes. So, do you have a nightstand?
I do. I have 9 books currently on my nightstand, and in my e-reader, I have about 7 books that I have just checked out. And Miss Linda, I love a good series, so I love coming back to characters, and I have since childhood, obviously, like with the um, like Beverly Cleary books or some Judy Blume books or with the American Girl books like I have or Nancy I loved Nancy Drew.
Oh.
So I have always loved staying with the character. So I follow authors who publish either like a book a year or a book every 2 years with the same characters, and those are always great to read for me.
Yeah. Here you are, a librarian. You were a little girl, spent a lot of time at the library. Did you ever dream, or was this your plan to become a librarian?
This was not my plan, Miss Linda, at all. Like, so I volunteered for the library in high school.
Uh-huh.
Aviva and I just the other day were talking about superlatives. And one of the superlatives that I got in high school was most likely to come back and be a librarian.
No way!
This is so funny. Because when I went to college, I was like, I'm going to study sciences and biology, and I'm going to go to medical school, and I'm going to be a poet. So I'm going to just be a poet and a doctor, and those are the things that I'm going to do. And then I got to my first biology class in college, and I was like, oh my God, I really don't like this.
Huh.
Like, this is fun and fascinating, and when I read about it I really love it, but the actual mechanics of these systems don't actually bring me any passion.
Uh-huh.
And so I love to see how they're connected. Like I love that part of science, like
Sure.
how every reaction leads to another thing. Like I love those things, but I don't really feel called to this. And so I was like, okay, fine. And at that point I had started making jewelry as a part of one of my college, like one of my other jobs in college.
Sure.
And so I was like, I will be a jeweler and a poet, and these are the things that I will do. And then I had a really large accident when I was in my sophomore year of college. So I
Oh,
have this very big scar,
no.
and it changed the course of my life in that the things that I wanted to do with my like fine motor skills would be harder.
Uh,
So in my junior year, I really was thinking about, I was like, okay, so I'm definitely majoring in English and I have this interest in writing and being a poet, and that's wonderful. And also I need another side gig that's gonna like help me support myself.
sure.
And what is that going to be? And that's when I went back to libraries and I was like, oh, I'm gonna get my master's in library sciences. So I have my MFA in poetry and my master's in library sciences, and it is definitely because I wanted to be committed to do these 2 careers that have everything to do with literacy. Like they're all about story. Like I was like, oh, I've been walking this path towards story my entire life.
I want to ask you about the people you see who come through the library that may not be able to read. Have you noticed that there are people who are illiterate?
Yes. Even in my own family as well, I have sometimes seen like older people who don't have a really good grasp on literacy or like didn't have an opportunity to go to a great school or do it's like in their lives, literacy wasn't as valued. But I also know that those people gravitate towards story. And so in the library who I come across, often we have learning centers at our libraries that are for adult literacy. And that as there can be a lot of shame around just our different literacy habits. So in the library, there are lots of ways for us to talk about literacy without causing anyone any shame or any type of discomfort. So we can say, what types of stories do you like? What types of things do you like to think about? What kind of magazines have you flipped through before? And then these are really great ways for people to talk about just their levels of literacy. And also for us to be like, we do have an adult learning center here. They are very discreet in they're very, very discreet and very private. So like, oftentimes we don't even know who goes to the adult learning center or not, just because we want people to feel really safe in their literacy journeys.
Why do you think it's important for people to know how to read?
That's a good question, because it gives us access to so many worlds.
Oh.
So many worlds. And I think we all need that access. We all need to be able to envision different things, to imagine bigger, to imagine better, or even to just imagine different so that we can understand that we're choosing this life.
I love that. And as you said, reading all those books made you more compassionate, when you were a child growing up. Well, I think this is fantastic. What do you see as some of the challenges that maybe young people or families have with embracing that idea that reading is so important and fundamental to my growth and, like you said, imagining, expanding themselves? What stands in the way?
I think that sometimes we lose ourselves in the routine of our lives and reading doesn't become a part of our routine. So I think that this is why remembering that we can access reading on so many different levels is really important, right? So like audiobooks and articles and like short stories, just that we can take our reading in bite-sized pieces and make that a part of our routine too, and that will still stimulate this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't have to think that, okay, I've got to commit 2 hours or 1 hour. It's just yeah, that is so great. Well, thank you so much, Adeeba, for sharing your literacy journey with me and the library. That sounds like it was your haven, and now you're back when you were a child, and now you're back into it. And are you looking forward to the doors opening back up?
I am. I'm looking forward to our patrons having what they need.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to providing that. I really feel like libraries provide safe spaces in New York City, and I'm looking forward to the ways that we can continue to do that in this new environment.
And well, Adeeba, thank you so much for joining me on Literacy Journeys with Linda. Is there something that I didn't ask you that's just burning in your heart about reading that you want to share?
Oh, Miss Linda, I'm just so grateful to you. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you so much for asking these questions.
Yes. Well, thank you for taking us on this journey. And so join me again next time on Literacy Journeys with Linda. Thanks, Adeeba.